Iowa is among the 37 states, along with D.C., that legalized medical marijuana. It is not among the 19 states that legalized the recreational use of the drug. President Joe Biden pardoned minor federal drug possession convictions, and he asked governors to do the same at the state level, although Iowa's governor has not. Democratic Attorney General Tom Miller wants her to look at that, while his Republican challenger, Brenna Bird, is not offering the governor advice on this.
It's up to a governor or president to decide whether to pardon someone or not. I think one thing that's important to point out, and that President Biden said as well, is that no one was in federal prison for simple marijuana possession. That's true at the state level as well. No one is in a state prison because of simple marijuana possession.
Always something else that is involved in that, is that what you mean?
Well, I mean that under state law, they are not able to be sent to prison.
What I'm saying is they would be in there because of some other crime
Oh, sure.
that they had committed.
When people are going to prison in Iowa, it has to be something that is a crime where prison's an appropriate punishment. So it might be something like dealing drugs with a gun or some other violent crime.
You had said that might be something that you would like Iowa's governor to look at on a state level. Why is that?
Well, I think that the possession of marijuana is a crime that has disproportionately affected people of minority, has been a crime where people disproportionately receive sort of punishment indirectly in terms of jobs, in terms of other kinds of activities. And you know, my main position is that we should move away from imprisonment or jail time for people for simple mispossession. That's what we're calling that. And for the governor to look at the whole situation and look at the collateral consequences. And I also think even more so that she should look at the situation for people that went into surgery, serious surgery, and then got an opioid prescription. And after a few days or after a couple weeks, got addicted to opioids, having no idea that they were at risk, and then subsequently had some criminal activity. I think she should really look at pardoning some of those individuals.
When you're out there campaigning or just meeting with people, what's coming up? What do people talk to you about, ask you about?
Well, a variety of issues. You know, Iowans are individuals. You know, in terms of our office, they talk about consumer protection. A lot of people are very complimentary when I'm out and about consumer protection. Other people talk about law enforcement. That's something that's very serious. And just generally about the law. They sometimes think I know a lot more about the law than I do and test me out that way. So it's a variety. And you know, Iowans, Dave, are wonderful people, and they've been so good to me on voting, and also when I'm out talking to them. Just really enjoy. Iowans enjoy being with them.
What are people talking about? What are they concerned about?
Yeah, so as I'm working in all 99 counties in Iowa, I'm hearing that Iowans want to see an attorney general who supports our law enforcement, who backs the blue. That is important to them. I appreciate the support we have of 74 sheriffs across Iowa, both Republican and Democrat. And I also am hearing from law enforcement agencies that are having a hard time filling vacancies they currently have. It's important we have an attorney general who supports our law enforcement and who sees that as the important profession that it is. We always need to have the best, the bravest, and the brightest in law enforcement, and to keep Iowa a safe place. We don't want to go the way of Chicago or Minneapolis. I'm also hearing from a lot of Iowans who are concerned about what's happening out in Washington, D.C., that the federal government is going too far. The overreach, whether it's things like COVID mandates or the student debt cancellation, that is a concern because that was not based on a valid law. That law, in order to be valid, would have to pass the House, the Senate, and be signed by a president in order to be that kind of program. And here, a married couple making $250,000 can each get up to $20,000 canceled off their student debt. And the rest of America has to pay for it. That's not right.
The need, she feels that the office needs to back the blue, and that law enforcement is not sufficiently supported enough.
Well, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, we do back the blue. in the most important way in terms of working with them on serious cases and support them, and they support us on that. We back them in other ways. You know, whenever I see a police officer on, you know, I always thank him or her for their service. It's very important service, and I recognize that, and I'm supportive of that.
This may be an odd question after I've asked you a lot of political questions, but would somebody brought this up at a luncheon I was speaking to, so I thought I'd throw it out to you. And he had asked, would your position be better if it were nonpartisan? So you didn't have to worry about, you know, a Republican governor not liking what the cases you're pursuing, that kind of thing. Would something like that ever make any sense?
Well, it makes sense to a point, but it doesn't work. It's not practical. You know, I think still the best way to choose an attorney general is by election rather than by appointment or another sort of scheme. But it's up to the attorney general. Is the attorney general independent? That is incredibly important. And that's been a landmark of my career, that I call him as I see him, particularly in terms of the law, that I'm independent. My opponent, on the other hand, you know, when she announced, and often she talks about suing Biden, that's her goal. And those are really code words for I'm going to be political. I'm going to be ideological as attorney general. And I totally reject that. Independence is what we should do.
And how have you demonstrated independence?
Well, you know, in terms of interpreting the law, in terms of our attorney general's opinions, from time to time, Democrats don't like that. Certainly, in terms of criminal prosecution, there should be no politics involved in that, and we've done that for 40 years, and in a variety of other ways. In terms of some of the positions I've taken, haven't pleased Democrats all that much. That I'm my own person and do what I think is right, and particularly interpreting the law.
How would you handle just political pressure on doing something? We have a previous president who's campaigning all over the place saying that there was fraud all over. He tried to get different states to somehow overturn elections. You have pressure on right now investigating him, but then also potentially the current president's son, and some of this is on the federal level, obviously. But how do you balance when politicians start pressuring you to do something?
Well, you know, that's kind of easy actually, because it's a do the right thing always. You know, that's my approach as a prosecutor. I am in Guthrie County. It's a close-knit community. And sometimes there are cases that people want you to bring that just aren't supported by the law and the facts. I follow the law. I prosecute the cases. Do the right thing. Explain to people why it's the right thing. That's always the best course of action.
Those two are back in a bit with their predictions, but first, what we learned after watching the one and only gubernatorial debate.